Let's go now to Sonia Gallego. She's in London, where a protest against Israel's ongoing genocide in Gaza is taking place. Sonia, so what exactly are we expecting from this protest, and how many people have turned out?
Well, what you're seeing is an action really by a collection of non-governmental organisations who have decided to come here just before Parliament breaks up for summer recess in order to complete an action, as it were, to remind them of the onslaught of war that is having on the lives of Palestinians trapped in Gaza. It is especially poignant that it is the non-governmental organisations such as Oxfam, War Child, Médecins Sans Frontières as well, who come here to try and raise the point of exactly how destructive this war has been on those lives of people here. And it does reflect some of the horror that we are seeing more strong points coming from politicians, as we saw Monday, that statement from those foreign ministers where they put their names to the unacceptable state of affairs, especially with the drip feeding of aid and how it is resulting in a reaction of horror from these foreign ministers. Now, the demonstration is about to begin shortly here, and you have a collection of about a couple of hundred of these representatives from these aid organisations. And what they're doing here is they're gathering in Parliament Square. They're going to gather behind a red line with a banner, Red Line for Gaza, drawing attention to the fact that a red line in this conflict has very much been crossed. And there will also be a poetry reading by the Palestinian poet Hiba Abu Nada, the 32-year-old who was killed by an Israeli strike. And here reading that poem is Fiona Smith from Oxfam. Fiona, you're going to be reading this poem and you're going to be drawing attention exactly from the perspective of Oxfam. Why is it so important that you have decided to come here and make this point in front of the Houses of Parliament today?
Well, I think for nearly 2 years we've watched atrocity after atrocity being perpetrated on the civilians in Gaza. And we want to say that enough is enough, and we would like our politicians to move from words to action and actually make sure that something tangible is put into place to make this violence stop. From an Oxfam perspective, our own aid workers are so hungry at the minute that they're sleeping all the time, they're finding it difficult to eat. We know that aid has not been able to get into Gaza since March. There are hundreds of trucks in the Rafah crossing and in Jordan waiting to go and feed these hungry people, but they simply cannot get access. What has been put into place, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, is basically a killing foundation. Desperate people are so hungry, they're going to get aid, and nearly 1,000 of those people have been shot dead in the last month. This is the killing fields.
And we've seen exactly the controversy that this particular foundation, this aid mechanism that the Israeli government has put in place, how controversial, how it's actually raised condemnation from that point here. Now, what, in your view as part of Oxfam, how has this been especially harmful for those who are trapped in Gaza?
Well, people are really hungry. They haven't been able to get water, infant formula, fuel. Basically, if they want to eat, they have to go and they get horribly penned into these areas where they then become target practice. It is really horrific. And we really want the UN to be able to do its job. We want to be able to do our job. We want to be able to go in there, we want to bring aid to people, and we want to make sure that everybody in Gaza can live in safety and with dignity.
That's very poignant approach there, and of course the fact that we've seen these killings as well taking place as well. I'd also like to talk about the issue with children as well. And Hirachi, I have with me here Hirachi Kundadrian from War Child. Now, Hirachi, how has the impact of this been on children? What are you hearing on the ground?
I mean, the stories we hear are horrific. I mean, kind of beyond comprehension. I think you can talk about the statistics of 17,000 children killed, many hundreds of thousands more who've been injured. But the reality is the individual stories. I was speaking to a colleague yesterday who talked, having visited Gaza, about children playing in the bomb sites of craters just a few minutes after a missile has struck. The violence has become so normalised that civilians are just trying to do their best to work around it. We've seen that. We released a report last year as War Child. 94% of children in Gaza expect to die. Nearly half hope for death. This is the worst place in the world to be a child by far. It's absolutely horrendous. The situation needs to be resolved. It needs to be resolved immediately.
I mean, those numbers are absolutely extraordinary, and not least to say also the psychological toll of that. And with aid being restricted as it is, I mean, from your perspective, what hope is there, and what's the damage in years to come upon the lives of these children?
Well, I think, as humanitarians, we have a duty to hold on to hope that we can see a resolution to this as soon as possible. I think, we've had foreign ministers calling for an immediate ceasefire. I mean, it needs to happen. It needs to happen immediately. I think what we're witnessing in Gaza is an ongoing slaughter, and it needs to stop. In relation to children, I think, normally we would see in a conflict situation, roughly around 20, 21, 22% of children would be experiencing some level of trauma. In Gaza, it's every single child. Every single child will need the assistance of War Child and other organisations to deal with the trauma that's been inflicted on them. It's going to take decades to sort out this problem that's been caused in a year and a half. It's going to be an ongoing, huge humanitarian response to deal not just with the basic needs, but the massive mental health crisis that people there are experiencing.
Now, we've heard also from those foreign ministers, as you referred to as well, speaking of how it's an unacceptable situation there. And they've spoken of their horror at the way that aid is being distributed. I mean, are they really understanding the full impact of what this war is having, in your view?
I think it's worse. I think they do understand, and they're not doing enough. I think in many ways that is generally worse. I think, probably the situation they're seeing is just as detailed as humanitarian organisations with the information that we receive. And based on that knowledge, this isn't enough. It's not nearly enough. Realistically, the fighting needs to stop, the ceasefire needs to come into effect, the hostages need to be immediately released, and children and vulnerable people need the assistance now. The fact that aid still continues to be blocked at the borders is completely unacceptable. We don't see this in other contexts, we don't see this in other countries. What we have at the moment is a population who are being dismantled, destroyed, their human dignity stripped away from them. This isn't really a war anymore. I think we need to recognise that and act on that basis.
Hirachi Kundadrian from War Child, thank you very much. And we're just going to return now back to Fiona Smith of Oxfam. Now, you're doing something in particular just to drive home the point, really, of this. It's a very poignant action that's taking place. And you're reading a poem by Hiba Abu Nada, the Palestinian poet who was killed by an Israeli airstrike. Tell us a little bit about that.
So she was a very acclaimed poet, but also an acclaimed novelist as well. And sadly, she was actually killed in October 2023 in an airstrike. So we're absolutely thrilled that we've been able to read one of her poems today, because what we really want to do is to really make the point that these are real people who are suffering. They're people like you or I. And that's why it's so important that we stand here today and we actually stand with the people of Gaza at this terrible time. So I'll be reading her poem today. There will also be an additional poem which has been written for us specially, which is really pulling out all of the red lines which have been crossed on Gaza over the past 2 years. So we're going to be asking everybody who's come here today to read that poem with us, to really show that we are standing together and we're united.
And in front of Parliament as well, just to drive home the point. Fiona, thank you very much. So we'll let you get into place for that. And with that bearing in mind, the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, also highlighted how this has become an unacceptable situation, chiming in with what those other foreign ministers stated in that statement on Monday. And how unjustifiable it is. Also, earlier this morning, on Tuesday morning, David Lammy did say in an interview that although the UK cannot unilaterally do anything of its own volition, it needs to work in tandem with those other foreign ministers in order to be able to drive home that point that the situation in Gaza needs to come to an end, that there needs to be a ceasefire, and that the delivery of aid needs to be facilitated far more than it is at this present time.
Okay, Sonia, we're just waiting to hear that poem by Hiba Abu Nada, a 32-year-old Palestinian poet who, as we heard there, was killed by an Israeli airstrike back in 2023. You were just speaking there to the lady Fiona Smith from Oxfam, who's going to be reading that poem. I believe she is due to start. Let's have a listen.
Okay. I need to get them to switch me on. Good morning, and thank you all for coming here today to stand with the people of Gaza. We start with a poem by the acclaimed poet and novelist Hiba Abu Nada, tragically killed in an airstrike on her home on October the 20th, 2023, like so many other people in Gaza. Not just passing. Yesterday, a star said to little light in my heart, we are not just transitions passing. Do not die. Beneath this close, some wanderers go on walking. You were first created out of love, so carry nothing but love to those who are trembling. One day, all gardens sprouted from our names, from what remained of heart's yearning. And since it came of age, this ancient language has taught us how to heal others with our longing, how to be a heavenly scent, to relax their tightening lungs, a welcome sigh, a gasp of oxygen. And now, I say, softly we pass over wounds, like purpose scars, a hint of relief as aspirin. Oh, little light in me, don't die, even if all the galaxies of the world close in. Oh, little light in me, say, enter my heart in peace. All of you, come in.
Okay, that was a poem we heard there from being read out, a poem by Hiba Abu Nada, a 32-year-old Palestinian poet who was killed by an Israeli airstrike 2 years back. And it was just being read there by Fiona Smith from Oxfam. She and others gathering today wearing red in protest against the ongoing genocide by Israel in Gaza. They're in London.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.